Received a question from one of my students that I think a lot of us can relate to. And she told me that there was someone that she really cared about, but she said they've drifted apart and nothing big had happened, but they'd stopped talking as much. And she wanted to reach out, but a lot of time had passed and she didn't know how to. And she was asking me advice about what to do. So let's sit with this one together because at some point, I think we've all felt it, that slow drift between people that we once held close to us. Not because of a fight, not because of any big betrayal, but because of something quieter. That can be often be time or distance or silence. And then without even realizing it, something that felt solid now feels distant. And we like to tell ourselves that it's just life. People get busy, we grow apart. Sometimes we move to new cities. Sometimes we get new jobs. Sometimes we start new chapters in our lives. And all of that is true. Life does move fast, particularly now. But sometimes what we call growing apart is really just neglect. It's a kind of passive forgetting. And when we let too much time or too much space go unacknowledged, it starts to harden into something that's more difficult for us to bridge. And that's why I want to say to you a quiet wisdom, a powerful wisdom. When it really matters, close the gap. We forget how healing it is just to show up. Maybe you've been putting off a hard conversation with your sister because you didn't know how she'd react. Or there's an old friend you've lost touch with and you keep meaning to send a text, but the longer you wait, the more awkward it feels. Or maybe you've had a misunderstanding with someone you love and you decided to give them space, and now it's been months and neither of you know how to come back to each other. But here's the thing, the wedge doesn't have to be dramatic to be damaging. It's not always about who was right or who was wrong. It's about what's being left unsaid. It's about all the small moments that we let slip past without reaching out, without repairing. So when it matters, when they matter, get in the car, book the ticket, make the call. I once worked with someone and she had a really complicated history with her father. There were years of missed birthdays, there were expectations that didn't meet, there was all this unspoken resentment. And they would send polite messages back and forward to each other on holidays, but that was all it was. It was surface level. Until one day she found out he was sick. And she said to me something like, I don't want the last thing I ever say to him to be Merry Christmas in a text. And so I encouraged her to book that ticket. I encouraged her to fly across the country. She didn't have the perfect words. She didn't know what she was walking into, but she showed up. And in doing that, just by showing up, everything began to soften. They didn't resolve everything, but they reconnected. And when he passed away 6 months later, she wasn't left with silence. She was left with peace. I need you to understand that presence is a form of love, especially in a culture where it's easier to text than to talk. It's easier to scroll past than to reach out. Showing up isn't always convenient, but it's meaningful. And sometimes the biggest damage comes when we don't talk, when we don't address the tension, where we don't clarify the misunderstanding, and we let that space grow between us and we hope it's going to resolve on its own. But very rarely it does. So you have to understand that distance and time and avoidance always ends in disconnection. So when something's off, say something. Even if you stumble through it, even if it's awkward, even if it doesn't go perfectly. Because healing doesn't come from waiting for the perfect moment. It comes from choosing connection when it would be much easier to retreat. It comes from staying close even when it's uncomfortable. It comes from recognizing when the silence between you is starting to turn into a story that you're both telling yourselves and choosing not to let that happen. The truth is that some relationships are meant to fall away, but others Others just need some tending. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is be the one who crosses the distance, who says, I miss you, who says, can we talk, who says, this matters to me and I don't want to lose it. It's not dramatic. It's not poetic, but it's powerful. So when it really matters, don't wait. Close the gap. Even just one step toward connection can make all the difference. My name is Monique Rhodes. I teach people how to be happier, how to have the life that they want. If you like what I'm teaching, subscribe, and I'd love to see more of you.